from ABC News. This is Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Chris Bury.
In Iraq, the new year has begun the way the old one ended, in a spasm of violence and bloodshed. In the north, rising ethnic and political tensions have led to assassination and revenge killing. And in central Iraq, the so-called Sunni Triangle, the guerrilla war against American forces shows no sign of letting up. Today, an Army helicopter was shot down west of Baghdad, killing one American soldier and wounding another. The helicopter, attached to the 82nd Airborne Division, crashed near Fallujah, now becoming a familiar flashpoint in this war. Tonight, American gunships attacked insurgent positions south of Baghdad. These airstrikes, part of Operation Iron Grip, are aimed at places where mortar and rocket attacks have been launched at American forces. Just how well U.S. troops are trained and equipped to fight a sustained guerrilla campaign may be the most critical question of the Iraq War. The Army, known for its Cold War emphasis on heavy armor, is betting billions on a controversial concept called the Stryker Brigade. The idea is to move combat teams more quickly than ever before in lightly armored vehicles that cruise at 60 miles an hour. The 1st Stryker Brigade is already on duty in Iraq, and as ABC News correspondent Don Daler reports, its soldiers are literally undergoing a baptism by fire.
Get out! Get out! Get out! Get down!
A momentous thing happened in the chaos of those foggy, dark, pre-dawn hours of December 17th, when the United States Army launched a massive raid on Samarra. It was something the world, and certainly the surprised residents of this central Iraqi city, had never seen before.
Where's your weapons? Guns.
In the confusion and noise and violence, as 10,000 soldiers looked for insurgents or their financiers, it's doubtful anybody there realized that history was being made.
Maintain security. Electric. This one first.
But it was certainly noted in Washington and on military bases everywhere. On this day, the U.S. Army was changed forever, when the Stryker Brigade, step one in the Army's transformation into a smaller, faster, smarter force, first went into combat.
Transformation is a different way of thinking, a different way of understanding, a different way of articulating the commander's intent on the ground, of his ability to visualize the battlefield.
Major Chuck Hodges is executive officer of Stryker Battalion 123. He spoke to Nightline during a sandstorm 2 days before the raid on Samarra.
The President of the United States calls, he needs a force there. He doesn't need the answer to being, well, I can get it there in 6 months. All right. Transformation is mobility, the ability to pick an organization up, move it 2,000 miles with a small logistical footprint, and put it where the president needs it.
Samarra has been a thorn in the side as far back as recorded history as I know it in Iraq.
Lieutenant Colonel Buck James is the battalion commander.
I want Renegade, eyes on. Right.
He sees his job in black and white terms: clean up Samarra, using every asset his shiny new battalion has.
It was always kind of Dodge City, kind of the wild, wild west. My mission is to kill and capture these troublemakers.
To accomplish that mission in the seething, resentful urban flashpoint that is Samarra,
I'll take left, you take right.
the Pentagon chose a brigade that didn't exist 4 years ago.
Go. Nothing there. Clear.
It was named for a new kind of vehicle, the Stryker, a moderately armed and armored personnel carrier redesigned from the rubber tires up.
One of the prerequisites for the new type vehicles is that they be able to get the soldiers to and from the battle fast. The Strykers are rated up to 60 miles an hour, but the drivers say on hard surfaces they can get this 20-ton giant up to 80.
The Strykers went from concept to combat in only 3 years. They are extremely popular with the company commanders.
The speed with which it happened is probably the most impressive thing.
That's part of what makes all this so unusual, how quickly the Army conceived of, built, and fielded a completely unique unit with new vehicles, new technologies, and new tactics. For a normally slow-moving organization, it was a blitzkrieg attack on tradition.
The military is a conservative organization. We're slow to change, not because we don't want to change, but because we've had success in the past, and you don't want to, the old adage, you don't want to fix what's not broken.
We are the best Army in the world.
General Eric Shinseki, former Army Chief of Staff, is the man who gave the Army a stiff push towards its future. There was, and is still, considerable resistance among traditionalists. But with one Stryker brigade now in Iraq and congressional funding locked in for an additional 5 others, the horse is out of the barn. They are designed for a new kind of war, a new kind of enemy.
I think the future of warfare is going to be more asymmetrical warfare with a non-contiguous battlefield, meaning there's not the enemy lines and the friendly lines, but the enemy's everywhere and you're everywhere.
The Stryker brigade is designed to be flown or shipped to any trouble spot anywhere in the world within 96 hours, a goal the Pentagon admits is not even remotely possible yet. The Air Force simply does not have enough big planes. It must be able to function as an expeditionary force, that is, reliant on itself for 3 days for everything: firepower, support, maintenance.
They're going up here to another FOB.
But the key to the Stryker brigade, what really sets it apart on a revolutionary scale, is its digital brain, the satellite-linked computer system that connects every vehicle and every soldier with each other, giving young squad leaders on the ground and colonels back at base the same instantaneous, real-time information.
The advantage we have now is the capability through our systems to show that squad leader, that young 26-year-old man who's got the lives of 8 men in his hands, a layout and a schematic of the building that he is going to have to clear. And when that ramp comes down and he comes off the back, the first time they've seen that situation is not at that point in time.
Make your mamas proud!
Don't close, I'm getting over there.
Okay, watch out.
But on that morning in December, when the 4th Infantry Division and the Stryker Brigade descended on Samarra to root out insurgent forces there, none of this technology and none of this equipment had yet been tested in battle. It was literally trial by fire.
This
From the very beginning of Operation Ivy Blizzard, Lieutenant Colonel Buck James had the ability to watch his battalion's every move.
1-8's got some guys on the other side of phase line red.
But it still comes down to sending young men into harm's way.
The moment of high anxiety for me is probably our initial penetration into the heart of our objective areas.
Dismount. Drop ramp. Drop ramp.
It's tough. You get it, but you gotta let it go. You gotta let them go do the job.
The raid on Samarra continued after sunrise, with soldiers of the Stryker Brigade going house to house, looking for people Colonel James describes as thugs. It is a violent process.
You don't start a fight to make friends.
You have to compensate them, go ahead and fall back to your vehicle.
But in an attempt to lessen resentment, a new Army policy pays cash for broken doors or other damage. More often than not, only women and children greeted the heavily armed soldiers, and they were, understandably, terrified. The initial intelligence was spotty. Few of the houses turned out to contain what the Army calls high-value targets. But slowly, bits of additional information came in from neighbors as they talked to the brigade's own military intelligence officers, another unique asset. In the days prior to the start of Operation Ivy Blizzard, the Stryker Brigade's full capability was put into play. Satellite photographs gave soldiers in every Stryker a detailed look at any street or building. Secret listening posts were set up at night. Unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, were launched to look for potential enemy attacks.
Let's go.
The Stryker Brigade has its own scouts. Hours before the raid, they sent the 114 Cavalry into Samarra to map out the territory.
We really want to just get a feel and a grasp of the town, see what we can do here. The town's supposed to be really aggressive. I mean, RPG, IED.
This is one of the most dangerous things the Cav does. This is a reconnaissance mission where they are on foot in the city of Samarra looking for some specific houses.
My name's Dave.
Huh? Dave? Despite the smiles, it's a tense time. The soldiers are exposed to potential rocket-propelled grenade attacks or small arms fire.
That smoke, that's the Stryker.
Samarra already proved dangerous earlier this day when the first Stryker lost in combat was destroyed by a huge roadside bomb. Although the Stryker was a total loss, the 6 soldiers inside survived. The Army says that shows they are the right vehicle for this kind of war. But not everyone agrees. More than any other aspect of the new brigade, these vehicles have been roundly criticized from many corners. The Government Accounting Office and the RAND Corporation say at 20-plus tons, they're too heavy to be easily transported. Other critics dismiss them as nothing more than a rubber-tired tank, a description Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Flowers resents.
This was never designed to be a tank. This is an infantry carrier that is designed to carry 9-man squads on the battlefield to assault positions with all their assault equipment.
It carries the infantry to the fight. And the most lethal thing in a Stryker is a squad in back of it.
As the day wore on, Samarra was getting a close-up look at that lethality. Over 200 Strykers were fanned out across the city, with thousands of soldiers making their way through alleys and hallways.
It ultimately comes down to 4-man fire teams, led by a young sergeant or a specialist who's probably anywhere from 19 to 20 years old, who are going to be going through the fatal funnel in these doorways, clearing these objectives.
The Strykers moved quietly through the city streets, but they're not nearly as effective off-road as tracked vehicles like tanks and Bradleys. Their tires can be shredded by sharp rocks, and they became stuck in the mud numerous times in the fields around Samarra. Tests showed the Strykers' armor was ineffective against certain types of rocket-propelled grenades, a popular weapon in Iraq. So just before they entered Iraq, the Army installed a stopgap measure called slat armor. This is, in theory at least, designed to catch an RPG before it detonates. The slat armor adds 2 more tons to every vehicle, which are already top-heavy. In their first few weeks in Iraq, 3 Strykers flipped over into canals, causing the deaths of 3 soldiers. But the people who are actually using the Strykers, the soldiers who are riding them into combat,
continue to push that through Wars 4 and Arrowhead.
And the officers who are managing the battle from these high-tech command vehicles, they are true believers.
The ability of these things to maneuver quickly and quietly and get to where they need to be is just amazing.
And ultimately, they say, the Strykers are simply a better, safer way to bring a lot of infantry soldiers to the fight, in a place where soldiers in unprotected Humvees and trucks are being killed almost daily.
You know, I've got a 10-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter back home. I feel pretty comfortable with my equipment. I'm going to be able to go do my task before me and come back home safely.
But the main thing that distinguishes the Stryker from any other vehicle is its communication system.
We got our Charlie companies moving up on this one route here.
A few miles from Samarra, Major Chuck Hodges watches the assault on a 6-inch computer screen. The blue dots are his Strykers.
And then here's 520 coming in. So the battalion, we got 123 infantry in the south, and then 520 coming in the north.
Soldiers in the field see the same picture. As his men get inside the city, Hodges views their progress on a satellite photo. The squares are the buildings of Samarra.
Roger, we began to breach on building 114, over.
Yes, they're in.
The enemy locations can also be placed on the screen. The Army calls that situational awareness. It is, in war, the ultimate weapon. But all that information is useless without the ability to act on it quickly, which is why the Stryker Brigade instituted its most dramatic change yet. The day before the raids began, Apache Company, led by a 30-year-old West Pointer, Mike Shackleton, was scouting their route into the city when an intelligence report came in about a cache of surface-to-air missiles hidden along a riverbank. New orders came across the radio.
What I want to do is, we got a priority mission here. Roger. We're going to move out. As soon as you get loaded up, we're going to move out at 40 miles an hour. Over.
Using the Strykers' wireless email system, Captain Shackleton ordered his company to change direction on the fly. On the way there, Shackleton plotted out exactly where each squad should go. When they arrived at the location, every platoon had already seen the computerized map of where their areas of responsibility were. The mortar squad knew where the potential threats were in the houses along the river. The snipers kept an eye on the trees at the far end.
Probably a section this way, a section that way. I don't see too much of a threat that way, basically.
By the time his men had all dismounted, there were very few orders left to give, and the only decision that remained was how best to secure the Iraqi missiles they found.
We have a secure perimeter, and we're going to search basically with whatever available daylight we've got.
It was considered a successful mission, not only because they found the missiles, but because they accomplished it quickly and while completely out of range of their traditional radios. The key decisions were made on the spot by Shackleton and his non-commissioned officers. The Army says the most revolutionary thing about the Stryker Brigade isn't the way it gets around or how it gets its information. It's the soldiers.
Guys coming in today have to operate so many systems, and they have to be almost a video game kind of nut guy that can operate stuff, and they got to be a warrior at the same time. They can put on a rucksack, pick up a weapon, and fight.
Open the door!
To stay lean and mean and mobile, the brigade says it demands more of its people than any other unit in any other army in the world.
What we're really trying to do is make our soldiers able to do more. So you'll have an infantryman that can fix the vehicle he rides on, can maintain the communications and electronic systems on it, rather than what we have now, which is an infantryman rides it and two other people maintain the vehicle and the communications.
But this transformation also involves how decisions are made.
Hey, you look that way.
In the traditional Army, orders for almost every action have to come and go up the chain of command, a time-consuming process.
Hey, get that building number. That may be a potential future target.
The Stryker Brigade puts more responsibility on the shoulders of its young leaders in the field. They are given guidance from the commanders back at base, but these captains and sergeants have the unique authority to react quickly against an elusive enemy who doesn't play by the old rules.
They try to inflict some casualties and then break contact and flee.
An enemy that hides in the midst of innocent civilians.
We're going to have to be able to defeat him with commanders on the ground who are flexible, agile thinkers who are able to execute that, the commander's intent given to him through a digital system. The individual soldier, the non-commissioned officers, and the leaders are the ones that are transforming in the way they think and in the way they act on the battlefield. That's true transformation.
The raid on Samarra resulted in the arrests of 1,600 suspected insurgents. 86 were killed and 48 wounded. It was the first real test for the Transformation Brigade, but only the first. These methods, these vehicles, and these soldiers will be in Iraq for at least a year.
The Army of today is the Army of tomorrow. It's squad leaders who are enabled by this technology, are learning the ways and means to be able to do this new shift in the future, and they're doing it now.
Change, at least fundamental change, doesn't come easily to the U.S. military. New technologies and tactics are usually adapted to help enhance the traditional ways of doing things, and that's why the Stryker Brigade is so controversial and being watched so closely. It truly is different on so many different levels. This is an interim step, though. This is not the Army of the future, but the success or failure of the Stryker Brigade here in Iraq could well determine the future of the Army. For Nightline, I'm Don Daler in Central Iraq.
I'll be back in a moment.